Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are setting our sights on a slice of time that is, quite frankly, difficult to wrap your head around.
Oh, absolutely. It's a colossal topic.
Yeah, we are talking about a span of 186 million years. And I don't just mean massive in terms of the calendar, though that is obviously huge. I mean massive in the sense of how it completely reshapes our understanding of what this planet is capable of.
Right. We're diving into the Mesozoic era.
Exactly. And usually, when people hear Mesozoic, their brains immediately snap to one specific image.
Jurassic Park.
Yes. The T-Rex roaring in the rain.
A triceratops grazing in a misty jungle.
Right, the water rippling in the cup. We have this very static, almost cinematic mental image of it. It's just, the age of dinosaurs. That's what we were taught in school.
And that is the colloquial term, yes.
Yeah.
The age of reptiles. But looking at the source material we have today, the geological reports, the climate data, the paleobotany, calling it just the age of reptiles, actually sells the era incredibly short.
It really does.
It's a bit of a misnomer. It's kind of like calling the entire history of the United States the age of the Ford Model T.
That's a great way to put it.
I mean, it captures one iconic element, sure, but it misses the actual story.
It feels like a branding issue.
Yeah.
Like we're missing the forest for the T-Rex.
It really is. Because if you look at the data in these sources, the Mesozoic wasn't a static movie set where dinosaurs just stomped around for nearly 200 million years without anything changing.
Right.
It was a time of profound transitions. We are talking about the total reconstruction of the Earth's surface.
Yeah, the sources highlight this immediately. We go from a world where all the land is stuck together to a world that looks somewhat like what we see on a map today.
Exactly. We go from a massive supercontinent to a fragmented world.
And the plants change too.
Hugely.
Yeah.
We go from forests dominated by ferns and conifers to a world exploding with flowers.
Which is an invention that happened during this time.
Yes. And perhaps most relevant to us right now, we see a global greenhouse climate that makes our modern warming look mild by comparison.
That's the part that really grabbed me. So for the listener, our mission today, based on these reports, is to construct a comprehensive Earth system view.
Not just bones.
Right. Not just bones. We aren't just looking at isolated skeletons in a museum today. We need to set the stage, the weather, the geography, before we can truly understand the actors.
And that is exactly why this deep dive matters. The Mesozoic is essentially a laboratory.
A really, really old laboratory.
Right. It's a 186 million year experiment in what happens to the Earth when you turn the heat up to 11. It's the best guide we have for understanding extreme greenhouse conditions.
So let's start with the stage itself. Section 1 of our materials focuses on tectonics and Pangea.
The foundation.
Yeah. When the Mesozoic starts, and this is around 252 million years ago, what does the map actually look like? Because it's definitely not the 7 continents we know today.
No, it looks completely alien. If you looked at a globe from space back then, you'd see a C-shaped world.
A C shape, like a croissant.
A bit, yes. Or think of a Pac-Man shape.
Okay, I can picture that.
All the major continental masses we know, North America, Africa, Eurasia, Antarctica, they were all amalgamated into this one massive supercontinent called Pangea.
And it was curved.
Right, wrapping around a wedge-shaped body of water called the Tethys Sea.
So you have this massive landmass, the Pac-Man, and then the Tethys Sea is essentially inside the mouth.
Exactly.
What is outside of that?
Just water. One giant global ocean called Panthalassa.
Just one ocean.
It spanned the entire rest of the globe.
Yeah.
Imagine sailing on an ocean where you could go around the world without ever hitting land if you stayed on the right latitude.
That's hard to wrap your head around. Just one endless ocean covering most of the sphere. But the sources mention that this layout had a huge impact on the climate.
That's from massive.
Specifically the interior of the continent.
Right. Think about weather today. Moisture comes from the ocean.
Yeah.
Evaporation happens over the sea. Clouds form. They blow inland, and it rains.
Basic water cycle.
But if you have a supercontinent that is so massive, the interior is thousands and thousands of miles away from the nearest coastline.
So the rain just can't get there. It runs out of gas.
Exactly. It just dumps all its moisture on the coasts. The source material describes these vast continental interiors as extremely arid.
Yeah.
We're talking about deserts that make the Sahara look wet.
Wow.
And the temperature swings would have been wild, because land heats up and cools down much faster than water. Without the ocean nearby to regulate things, you'd have scorching summers and freezing winters.
The analogy that came to mind while reading this was, imagine driving from New York to Paris.
Okay, I'm with you.
But you don't cross an ocean, you just drive.
Right.
But to get there, you have to drive through a desert that stretches for thousands of miles. That was the Triassic world, just endless red rock and sand.
That's a really great way to visualize it.
Yeah.
And that harsh environment dictated what could actually live there. It acted as a barrier. But as we know, the Earth doesn't stay still.
Kanju was never going to last.
No, it wasn't.
And this breakup wasn't a one-time event, right? It wasn't like a giant cracker just snapping in half instantly.
No, it was a three-phase divorce, as the geologists lay out in the report.
Yeah.
It was a protracted process that spanned millions of years.
Let's walk through those phases, because I think it really explains why the world looks the way it does now to the listener. Phase 1 starts pretty early, in the late Triassic.
Right, around 201 to 180 million years ago. This is where the North and South split.
Okay.
Laurasia, which is basically North America, and in Eurasia, starts rifting away from Gondwana, which is the southern continents.
And this is what opens up the Central Atlantic.
Yes, and the Gulf of Mexico, too.
Mm.
But the key thing here, and we'll definitely come back to this when we talk about extinctions later, is how it split.
Right.
It wasn't a silent tearing of the crust. It involved the Central Atlantic Magmatic Province, or CAMP for short.
Magmatic. That sounds intense.
It was massive volcanic activity.
Yeah.
We were talking about lava flows that covered millions of square kilometers.
Unimaginable scale.
But geographically, this is the start of the Atlantic Ocean. Then we hit phase 2, around 150 to 120 million years ago.
The Jurassic into the Cretaceous.
Yes, this is where the southern block, Gondwana, starts falling apart.
This is the breakup of the band?
It is. South America and Africa, which were locked together like puzzle pieces, start to unzip, and India breaks off.
India just goes solo.
Completely solo.
Yeah.
It becomes an island continent racing north across the ocean. It was actually moving remarkably fast in geological terms.
And then phase 3?
That's the late Cretaceous, roughly 100 to 66 million years ago. Australia and Antarctica finally separate.
Okay.
The Atlantic widens significantly. And interestingly, the source notes that this rapid plate movement in the Cretaceous is what built the Rocky Mountains.
Wait, really? The Rockies are a Mesozoic project.
They are.
I usually think of them as a very modern feature.
Their roots are deep in the Mesozoic. The Sevier and Laramide orogenies, these are mountain-building events, were structural responses to that rapid tectonic activity.
How does that work exactly?
Basically, as the plates were sliding and crashing on the western edge of North America, the crust buckled and pushed these mountains up.
So while the T-Rex was walking around in the late Cretaceous, the ancestors of the Rockies were rising up in the background.
Exactly. The stage is constantly shifting under their feet. It wasn't a stable platform at all.
Okay, so we have the map. We have the continents drifting apart. Now we need the weather report. And looking at the data in section 2 of our sources, the forecast is oppressive.
Relentlessly hot. The report calls it a greenhouse state.
Right.
And we need to be careful with that term because we use it today to describe global warming, which is a crisis. But the Mesozoic was on a completely different level.
This wasn't just a heat wave.
No, it was the baseline for millions of years.
And this is driven by CO2, right? Tectonic outgassing and volcanoes.
Yes, carbon dioxide.
Yeah.
But the levels are staggering. Today, we're worried, rightfully so, because we were pushing 420 parts per million.
And climbing.
In the early Triassic, it was 5 times that.
5 times modern levels.
And it gets higher. The mid-Cretaceous peak, this is the hottest point, saw estimates between 3,500 and 4,500 parts per million.
That is 11 times modern levels.
11 times. Imagine the atmosphere holding 11 times more heat-trapping gas than it did before the Industrial Revolution. It was a thick, insulating blanket wrapped around the entire planet.
So what does that actually feel like on the ground, or I guess in the water? If I stepped out of a time machine in the mid-Cretaceous, am I instantly heat-stroked?
Depending on where you are, you might be boiled. The ocean tells the story best here. The mid-Cretaceous surface temperatures were, on average, 14 degrees Celsius higher than today.
A 14-degree average increase. That's completely catastrophic by modern standards.
It is. In the tropics, the water temperature reached 42 degrees Celsius.
42 degrees? That's over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. That is hot bath water.
It's basically a hot tub. Fish would have been living in a hot tub.
That's insane.
It forces you to completely reimagine the biology of the era. The metabolic rates, the oxygen requirements, everything has to change when you were swimming in soup.
Yeah.
But the most shocking stat, for me at least, is what was happening at the poles.
Oh yeah, this part of the reading blew my mind. Because we are so used to the idea of ice caps. A white North Pole, a white Antarctica. It's foundational to our modern geography.
Delete that image completely.
Yeah.
In the Mesozoic, there was no permanent ice. None.
Zero ice caps.
The Mesozoic had tropical poles. The data shows that at high latitudes, like the Falkland Plateau, which is at 60 degrees south, right near the Antarctic, the water was 31 degrees Celsius.
31 degrees Celsius at 60 degrees south.
Yes.
That's like tropical beach weather near the Antarctic Circle.
Precisely. And the implications for life there are huge. We have found dinosaur fossils and evidence of temperate forests in the South Polar regions.
So it wasn't a frozen wasteland?
Not at all. It was lush. It was green.
Imagine standing there. It's the South Pole, so you still have the polar night, right? The tilt of the Earth hasn't changed.
Right. The physics of the solar system were the same. So you'd have these bizarre forests that are pitch black for months at a time, but they aren't cold.
That is so weird to think about.
It's a warm, dark, temperate rainforest filled with dinosaurs adapted to low light.
That really feels like science fiction. But there's a dark side to this heat, right? The report mentions something called OAE2.
Yes, Oceanic Anoxic Event 2. This happened around 93.5 million years ago. This is the nightmare scenario for the ocean.
What happened?
Well, when you heat the ocean up that much globally, the actual physics of the water changes.
How so?
Usually cold water sinks. In our modern ocean, cold water at the poles gets heavy and sinks to the bottom, carrying vital oxygen down to the deep ocean.
Okay.
It circulates like a giant conveyor belt. But if the water is super high everywhere, that stratification collapses.
So the water just doesn't mix.
Exactly. The deep water warmed up rapidly, circulation basically stopped, and the oxygen just vanished.
It's suffocated.
The entire marine column, especially the depths, became anoxic. No oxygen at all. It was a hot, stagnant, suffocating ocean.
That is a terrifying image. A hot tub ocean where nothing can breathe if it goes too deep.
It really highlights the fragility of the Earth system. You push the heat too high, and the fundamental life support systems of the planet start to fail. It became a dead zone for millions of years.
Speaking of life support, let's move to the land. Because while the oceans were suffocating, the land was going through what the sources call a green revolution.
This is one of my favorite parts of the whole Mesozoic story. It's the story of plants, specifically flowers.
And it starts with a mystery. Charles Darwin actually called it an abominable mystery.
He did. He was looking at the fossil record, and he saw that for most of history, there are no flowers.
Yeah.
No angiosperm.
It's all ferns and pine trees.
Right? Cycads, conifers, gymnosperms. The world was green, but it was a very different shade of green. And then, suddenly, in the Cretaceous, flowers appear and they just take over.
It says here in the data they went from rare to dominant in a 45 million year window. In geological time, that is a blink of an eye.
It's an absolute blitzkrieg. And for a long time, scientists didn't know why. Was it just because they attracted insects? Was it the fruit?
But our source points to something much more mechanical. It's not about pretty colors. It's about leaf vein density.
Right. It sounds dry, I know, but it's a revolutionary piece of natural engineering. The report cites a major physiological breakthrough around 100 million years ago.
What did they do?
Angiosperms evolved a way to pack more veins into their leaves.
What's the metric the report uses?
They surpassed a critical density of 2.5 to 5 millimeters of vein per square millimeter of leaf.
Okay, so they are hyperveiny leaves. Why does that matter to the plant?
It's all about plumbing. More veins mean you can move water through the leaf much faster. If you can move water faster, you can keep your stomata, those little pores on the leaf that let air in, you can keep them open longer.
Ah, so you can breathe more.
You can take in more CO2 without drying out in that hot greenhouse sun. This allowed angiosperms to photosynthesize at a rate that conifers just couldn't match.
So they grew faster.
They literally outworked them.
So the pine trees and ferns were driving a sensible sedan, and the flowering plants showed up in a Formula One car.
Exactly. And because they could grow faster, they dominated the upper canopy. They stole the light. And that rapid diversification led to the 300,000 species of flowering plants we have today.
It's amazing to think that the reason we have roses and orchids and oak trees is basically down to plumbing. Better plumbing.
Evolution often favors the most efficient plumber. And this changed everything. It changed the food sources for the dinosaurs. It changed the insect world. It changed the entire soil chemistry.
So we have the stage-shifting continents, hot tub oceans, and we have the scenery, these high-performance flowering plants taking over the landscape. Now let's talk about the actors, the stars of the show.
The dinosaurs.
But the report makes a really important distinction here that we need to point out. We tend to think dinosaurs showed up and immediately ruled the world, like they just walked in the door and took the throne.
Which is entirely false. The timeline in the source is very clear on this. Dinosaurs didn't start on top. In the Triassic, dinosaurs were the underdogs.
Let's go back to the Triassic then. Who was actually running things?
Well, after the big mass extinction at the end of the Permian period, the world was dominated by synapsids, animals like Lystrosaurus, and huge amphibians.
Lystrosaurus is that weird pig-like reptile?
Yeah, a beak-faced, burrowing herbivore. It was absolutely everywhere, and there were huge crocodile-lined archosaurs roaming around too.
So where were the dinosaurs?
The first true dinosaurs, things like Nisosaurus around 243 million years ago, were small. They were bit players in the ecosystem.
Just trying to survive.
Exactly. They were living in the shadows of these other giants, probably scurrying out of the way to avoid being eaten.
So what changed? How did they eventually get the crown?
They needed a lucky break. And that break was the end-Triassic extinction.
The one caused by the Campi volcanism we mentioned earlier? The Atlantic tearing open?
Yes. That catastrophic event wiped out the competition. It killed off most of the large amphibians and the non-dinosaur archosaurs.
But the dinosaurs made it.
The dinosaurs happened to survive, possibly because they were better adapted to the chaos, or maybe they grew faster, we aren't entirely sure. But suddenly, the world was empty.
And they filled the vacuum.
They exploded into it. That's when you get the Jurassic giants. They grew huge because nothing was stopping them anymore.
Now, living alongside these giant dinosaurs were the mammals. And this is another area where our mental image is usually completely wrong.
Yeah.
Because I always picture a shrew, just a terrified little shrew hiding under a fern, hoping the T-Rex doesn't step on it.
That is the classic stereotype. A tiny, frightened snack for a dinosaur. But the fossil record shows something totally different. The report calls it a diversity showcase.
Yeah, the examples here in the source material are wild. Let's run through a few of them for the listener. Castorocata.
This is a Jurassic mammal.
Yeah.
And it definitely wasn't a shrew. It was semi-aquatic.
Like a beaver.
Very much so. It had a flat tail like a beaver and webbing on its feet. It was swimming around the rivers catching fish.
So we had beaver-like mammals swimming around in the Jurassic. That totally breaks the scared shrew image. What about Frutifossor?
This one was really cool. It was a scratch digger. It had these specialized, massive forearms for digging into termite mounds.
So an anteater.
Basically an anteater, but way before actual anteaters existed.
Mm-hmm.
It shows that Mesozoic mammals were already specializing in very specific diets.
And Veloticotherium.
The name gives it away. Velotico refers to flight. It was a glider. Think of a modern flying squirrel. It had a membrane of skin stretching between its limbs. It was gliding from tree to tree above the dinosaurs' heads.
But the one that really destroys the frightened snack myth is Repenomamus.
Ah, yes. The gotcha fossil. This was a hefty mammal weighing up to 15 kilograms.
That's like a badger or a medium-sized dog.
Exactly. And when paleontologists found one of these remarkably preserved fossils, they looked in the stomach region.
And what did they find?
Juvenile dinosaur bones.
It ate a dinosaur.
It ate a dinosaur. So the food chain wasn't strictly one way. Mammals were predators too. They occupied nocturnal niches. They developed warm-bloodedness, hair, large brains. They were thriving in their own right.
They weren't just waiting around for the asteroid to hit. They were living their own complex lives.
Yeah, absolutely. They were taxonomically and ecologically diverse. We are realizing now that the age of dinosaurs was also the age of early mammals. They were just playing different roles on the stage.
Let's step off the land now and go back to the water. Section 5 of the deep dive material is titled The Marine Revolution.
Which is highly ironic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Life crawls out of the ocean, evolves into reptiles on land, and then a bunch of them look at the water and say, actually, let's go back.
Yeah, I changed my mind.
It's too dry up here. Let's swim.
So who are the big players returning to the sea in the Mesozoic?
Well, you have the ichthyosaurs. These are the ones that look remarkably like modern dolphins.
Convergent evolution.
Convergent evolution at its absolute finest. The same shape evolves because it's simply the best hydrodynamic shape for moving through water. Then you have the plesiosaurs.
The long-necked ones.
Right, like the classic Loch Ness monster archetype. And later on in the Cretaceous, the mosasaurs, which are giant marine lizards, closely related to modern monitor lizards.
The report mentions a specific evolutionary bottleneck for the ichthyosaurs, though.
Yeah, it's a fascinating detail. In the Triassic, before that extinction event we talked about, ichthyosaurs were wildly diverse. There were some the size of modern whales, like Shonosaurus, which was over 20 meters long.
Massive.
But the Triassic-Jurassic extinction crushed them. They survived the event, but they lost their variety. They went from many different shapes and sizes and ecological roles to just a few specific lineages.
So they bounced back, but not fully.
They never really recovered their full range of morphological forms. They were diminished.
Now, here's a detail in the ocean section that I had honestly never heard of before reading this. The Battle of the Reefs. Clams versus coral.
This is a very strange ecosystem shift. When we think of reefs today, we think of coral. Colorful, branching coral. But in the Cretaceous, something weird happened. These clams, called rudists, took over.
Describe a rudist for me, because when you say clam, it makes me think of something small on a dinner plate.
These weren't your average clams. They were highly aberrant. Some were shaped like heavy boxes, others like long twisted horns, or even trash cans.
Trash can clams.
Yeah, and they grew in these incredibly dense clusters, cementing themselves together to form massive reef structures.
And they actually beat the coral.
They absolutely decimated them. Starting in the Aptian-Albian period, rudists outcompeted corals globally. Coral reef productivity plummeted to near zero in the late Cretaceous.
How does a clam beat a coral in reef building?
The prevailing theory, which our source supports, is that rudists could handle the extreme heat much better. Remember, the oceans were basically hot tubs and chemically strange.
Right, the greenhouse state.
Rudists were tough. They could tolerate the high salinity and the extreme warmth. The delicate corals simply couldn't keep up.
So if you went scuba diving in the late Cretaceous, you wouldn't see a Great Barrier Reef of beautiful coral. You'd see a Great Barrier Reef of box clams.
Giant horn-shaped clams as far as the eye could see. It would look like an alien planet. The coral reefs we know today only came back because the rudists went completely extinct with the dinosaurs.
That is fascinating. It just shows how different biological dominance can be depending on the underlying climate.
It does. It shows that nothing is permanent in nature. Even the ecosystems we think of as timeless, like coral reefs, are subject to total replacement if the conditions change.
I want to zoom in now. We've been talking globally. Pangea, global oceans, global temperatures. But Section 6 spotlights a specific region that gives us amazing localized detail. Australia.
The Australian fossil record is incredibly special because during the Mesozoic, Australia was located much closer to the South Pole. So it gives us this unique high-latitude perspective.
And a lot of it was underwater, right? The source calls it the Eromanga Sea.
Yes. There was a massive inland ocean covering what is now central Australia. It was a shallow sea, but it was full of absolute monsters.
Monsters of the outback. Who are we talking about here?
The heavy hitter is Kronosaurus queenslandicus.
Great name.
It's a plesiosaur. Imagine a 10 to 11 meter long marine predator. Not a long neck like a plesiosaur, but a short, powerful neck and a massive, heavy head. It had bone-crushing teeth designed to eat giant squid and hard-shelled ammonites.
10 meters. That's essentially a school bus with giant teeth.
Basically. And swimming alongside it were those long-necked elasmosaurs like Aeromangosaurus. It was a very dangerous place to take a dip.
But it wasn't just sea. The Winton Formation describes a land environment in Australia.
Right. The Winton Formation is an incredible fossil deposit. It paints a picture of a wet, temperate floodplain. Think of Amazon-scale rivers meandering through a dense forest.
And we have giant sauropods there.
Yes, Australopithecus, which is Australia's largest known dinosaur, and predators like Australopithecus, which is a megaraptor. But the fossil that really caught my eye in the report is Conversaurus eversi.
The ankylosaur.
It's an armored dinosaur, yes. But what makes it truly special is that it is one of the most complete skeletons ever found in Australia, and crucially, it has preserved stomach contents.
They actually know what it ate.
They do. And the contents contain primitive flowering plants. This is direct physical evidence of diet.
Oh, wow.
It links the rise of the angiosperms we talked about earlier directly to dinosaur biology.
That's the smoking gun.
It is. It connects the botanical revolution straight to the animals eating it. It proves that dinosaurs were actively adapting to this brand new food source.
And we can't talk about Australian Mesozoic fossils without mentioning Lightning Ridge. This sounds like pure fantasy fiction. Fossils made of gemstones.
It really does sound made up.
Ah.
But it's real geological science. At Lightning Ridge in New South Wales, the environmental conditions were just right so that when bones and shells decayed underground, they were slowly replaced by silica. Opal. Precious opal. So you find a dinosaur jawbone, but it literally flashes with blue and green fire. It's a flawless 3D replica of the ancient biology preserved in solid gemstone.
That is just beautiful to picture.
And it's scientifically invaluable. It records a freshwater ecosystem situated right near the Paleo-Antarctic Circle. They found steropod on there, which is an early relative of the modern platypus.
A gem-encrusted platypus ancestor.
Only in the Mesozoic. It's the kind of thing that makes you realize just how magical geology can be.
We have covered the rise, the climate, the plants, the life, but now we have to talk about the fall. Section 7 of our deep dive, the end of the world.
The Mesozoic is dramatically bookended by death. It starts right after a mass extinction, and it ends with one.
And there's a major contrast here that the sources point out. The Triassic-Jurassic event versus the famous KPG event.
It's a tale of two very different extinctions. The TJ event, which we touched on with the breaking of Pangea, was fundamentally volcanic, the Pangea eruptions.
The mechanism there was described as a geological instant.
Right. It happened fast in geological terms. Phase 1 was a volcanic winter.
The ash.
The sulfur aerosols blocked the sun, causing rapid global cooling. Then Phase 2 kicked in. The sheer volume of CO2 released caused massive global warming and severe ocean acidification.
So it's a brutal 1-2 punch, freeze them in the dark, then fry them.
Exactly. And that extreme volatility wiped out 50% of marine genera. It cleared the board for the dinosaurs to take over the Jurassic.
At the end of the Cretaceous, that was totally different. That wasn't volcanic.
No, that was extraterrestrial. The Chicxulub asteroid, 66 million years ago.
The report calls it a catastrophic interruption.
I think that's the perfect phrase for it. Because looking at the data, the dinosaurs were actually doing fine. They weren't in some terminal decline. They were highly diverse. They were specialized. They had survived and thrived for over 100 million years. And then, bam, a 10-kilometer rock hits the planet.
Total darkness, acid rain, metal poisoning.
It instantly shut down global photosynthesis. And if you shut down the plants, the food web collapses entirely from the bottom up. The herbivores starve, then the carnivores starve. It was an ecosystem collapse of unprecedented speed.
Who survives something like that?
Organisms with resting stages, things like dinoflagellates that can just go dormant and wait it out. Deep sea dwellers who rely on detritus falling from above, rather than fresh living plants. And of course, the scavengers.
Mammals?
The small, adaptable, omnivorous mammals. They could hide, and they could eat whatever was left over. The sudden removal of the non-avian dinosaurs was the greatest opportunity in mammalian history. It cleared the board once again.
So, bringing this all together now, what is the grand synthesis here? We have spent all this time walking through 186 million years of history. What are the big takeaways for the listener?
According to the reports, I think there are two main lessons. First, the incredibly tight link between tectonics and biology. Breaking up the supercontinent Pangea actually increased global biodiversity.
Because it created more isolated arenas, like distinct continents.
Exactly. Evolution works very differently in isolation. By creating separate continents, you allow different biological experiments to run simultaneously. Marsupials in Australia, placentals elsewhere. It vastly enriched the global biolibrary.
And the second lesson?
Resilience and resets. Extinctions are horrible, obviously, but they are engines of evolutionary change. The Canampi volcanism cleared the way for the dinosaurs to rise. The asteroid cleared the way for us to rise. They abruptly redirect the entire flow of life.
But there's a severe warning in here too, right? That's so what for the modern listener sitting at home?
There is. And we need to be clear, we are just reporting what the climate models and sources emphasize here. They point out that we are currently increasing CO2 levels at a rate that is 100 to 200 times faster than natural post-ice age increases.
100 to 200 times faster.
Yes. The sources argue we are approaching the scales of change that triggered these Mesozoic mass extinctions. The Mesozoic isn't just ancient history, it's a very real forecast. It shows us exactly what happens to the ocean and the atmosphere when you inject massive amounts of carbon rapidly. Acidification, anoxia, extreme heat.
Well, we have seen this movie before in the rocks.
Precisely. And that knowledge is arguably the most valuable thing we can take from studying these 186 million years. It's a record of planetary limits.
It's a very sobering thought. We are running the same experiment, just much, much faster. Well, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought, something to chew on after the deep dive ends. We often think of ourselves as the masters of the planet, right? We think our dominance is inevitable. Humans are the pinnacle of evolution.
Sure, that's the human bias.
But looking at this history, mammals only got their shot because a rock fell from the sky. It was completely random chance if that asteroid had missed, if it had flown by just a few minutes earlier or later.
The dinosaurs wouldn't have disappeared. The mammals would have stayed small.
Right. Dinosaurs were highly specialized. They were smart. Some of them, like Trudon, were getting pretty brainy for reptiles. So if that rock misses, is a descendant of Trudon hosting this deep dive right now instead of me.
It's very possible. We might just be the alternate timeline.
That is definitely something to think about. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Mesozoic. It's a world of fire, flowers, and monsters, and it's the foundation of the ground we walk on today.
It was an absolute pleasure.
We'll see you on the next deep dive. Stay curious.